Hello.
Hi, how are you?
I'm doing okay. How about you?
Good. I know Ed can't be here and JB can't be here. I talked to Ed.
Well, I'm recording the session, so it'll be available to anyone that can't make it.
Okay.
Hey, Kelly,
Mm-hmm.
quick question for you and Ed on the HLC thing. Do you think kind of extended bullet points would be enough so that you guys can write the voice around it?
Yeah, for sure.
Okay.
That's what I'm gonna do for Ed. It's just
Okay. Yeah, I thought that might be better.
he's a little overwhelmed with that right now, I think.
Uh-oh.
I mean, just the date's approaching and the finance people are not
Yeah.
of one voice.
Right. Makes it a little tougher.
Mhm. Jamar, where's your face?
Behind the screen.
Like the Wizard of Oz? Like that guy?
There he is.
How's everyone doing?
Good.
Closer to the weekend, so better.
That's good. Tina?
Everything's beautiful.
Okay. Yeah, I like that. George?
Well, hey, Jamar, how are you? Good. Everything wonderful here. How about yourself?
Hey, I'm doing quite swell myself. Thank you.
Good.
Christina?
Oh, good.
That's it?
Nothing exciting.
Okay. All right. Okay.
For today, at least. Tomorrow might be a different story.
Hey, tomorrow is
I
Friday.
don't know.
Okay.
That's right.
Steven? How you doing?
Afternoon. Doing pretty well.
That's
How
good.
about yourself?
That's good. I'm doing pretty good. Thank you.
Are you
Miss
settling
Eileen?
into your new role, okay, Jamar?
I think that's safe to say. No,
He's
absolutely.
doing an outstanding job in his new role.
I'm not surprised.
No, me either.
I don't know where you got that from, but thank you.
You told me, and I believed you.
Uh, did I miss anybody?
Hey, Jamar, it's Chris Nowak. How are you?
Good. I'm doing great. How about yourself?
I'm good, thank you.
That's good. I couldn't see your face.
No, I don't have a camera.
Oh, okay. Well, your voice is definitely sufficient enough.
Oh, thank you.
Kelly, I'll let you take things over for the meeting.
Is the whole meeting my stuff?
Yes.
And it's for 45 minutes?
It's all you.
If you don't need all that time, then we can see if there's anything else anybody else wants to discuss, or we'll have
Okay.
bonus time available.
Okay. So, let me share my screen. This is always dicey, isn't it? You're seeing just the one slide, right?
I see, it looks like one slide with something off to the right with notes.
Oh, you're seeing that part.
We're seeing
Okay.
your whole presentation, your speaker.
There, now I just see one
I
slide.
don't know. Okay. So just appreciative inquiry. So this is just high level information about appreciative inquiry. And this is an approach that we would like to use when we go through the strategic planning process, because it is, it's a more positive approach. It helps build on our strengths. We don't focus on our problems. And people usually leave any session feeling more energized rather than less energized. So basically, I learned about appreciative inquiry when I started hearing about appreciative advising. That's where I heard about it first. And that's when you're doing counseling and advising to help people focus on their individual strengths, rather than where they're weak and where they need to build up. Like, what are they strong at and that they could grow from. And then I just more recently learned about the whole appreciative inquiry approach. So the idea is that you search for the best in people in the organizations, and the emphasis is on our positive core, not the threats against us, not our weaknesses, but where are we the strongest. And I think this is important as you lead your committees. You can either have appreciative inquiry in the foreground or the background. And I would probably recommend the background, not make appreciative inquiry the focus of what you're trying to do, but more an attitude you bring toward it, an approach toward it. And the whole appreciative inquiry started with this David Cooper writer, who is an organizational behavioralist. So if you compare appreciative inquiry to like a normal SWOT analysis, or let's look at our problems, this is how it breaks out. Appreciative inquiry really focuses on the best of what we have, and then envisioning what could be or what might be. And then we talk about what should be. So that's when you get into the strategies. But the basic assumption is that we're gonna create this organization that we all value and that we know can be even better. Problem solving approach is more like a medical model. Find the problem, analyze the causes, look for a solution, plan some treatment, and we need to solve this problem. The appreciative inquiry approach, much of it revolves around these, they call it appreciative interviewing. And in the academic master planning process, which where we applied it a few years ago, we broke people into, I don't know, it seemed like it was groups of 15 or 20, but then even within that into groups of 2 to 4. I think we did 2, but now the more that I read and learned, I think groups of 3 to 4 are better. If you have 2 and somebody has an off day or somebody's shy, it's really hard to have an interview with 2 people. If you have 3 to 4, it generates a little more energy. The questions are open-ended questions. You're looking for people's stories, their memories, and essentially their points of pride around our college. Once people do that, and you can develop the questions however you want, whatever questions you want them to be related to the topic of your committee. And then people can share briefly when you bring them back to the bigger group. The goal of all of it is to get recorded people's memories of their best experiences, what they value about the college, and just generally what gives us our life and our spirit, so that you have that recorded. The example in our academic master planning that we did a few years ago, the overarching goals for this process was that we were going to use a positive energy producing approach. We've all had plenty of those energy sucking meetings in our lives. I know we have. This is not usually that. And we wanted to determine our core shared values, and we wanted to develop guiding principles in a strategic direction. And I will say we did that. I think where it sort of fell a little bit off the rails is after that, the steps that came after that. We didn't really have a Tina that kept us on track as well. So, but actually the whole initial process I was pretty happy with. I think it was good. These are the questions we used when we split people into the group and did these people interviewing each other. These were all faculty members. And so we were just looking at, when did they have the best experience as an MCC faculty member? What were they doing? Remember what that was like. And then what do they value about themselves, contributions to the college, the people that work at MCC? What helps MCC faculty pull together? What opportunities do they see? And then you get into the envisioning, the dreaming. What 3 things do you hope or wish for the future? And this was all done in one day, maybe, I don't know, Irene, you were a co-facilitator, I think, maybe a couple of hours, maybe.
Yeah, it was a couple hours. I think it was during faculty seminar days, I thought.
Yeah, it was. And we put white paper tablecloths down on the tables, and people could write. We gave them markers. They could, keep notes, draw pictures, whatever they wanted to do to make it still more of a fun, energy producing thing. With this virtual stuff, you may not be able to do that, although I think there's some pretty cool software that maybe you could. And what we ended up with after that process was basically we could identify on the academic side what we do well, what we valued, and then what we hope for the future. So we came out with a core set of values that I think is really important, because at least we know that no matter what else we disagree on, we share these core values and we take pride in the things we do well. And then we had some common hopes for the future. So then you probably ask, well, what about problems? What about people who want to talk about problems? Because people always will want to talk about problems. The idea is you don't dismiss them. We just aren't going to use them as a basis for planning.
Your new ones right here. This one and this one. Oh, okay.
We're going to listen to problems. We're going to validate that, yeah, that person's experience is their experience, and then reframe the problems as an opportunity. And so an example might be, oh yeah, what I remember about MCC is all that terrible communication. That could become, our communication was outstanding when blank. Or students are confused by financial aid can become, we helped students so much when we did blank. So I'm going to stop sharing now, and you can ask me questions. I'm not a master at this, I will tell you that. Or just your thoughts about how you might want to approach your committees.
Is it best done like in one setting like that, or can you break it into different pieces and parts?
You can break it into different pieces and parts. When we did the academic master planning, we had the couple of hours where we did those questions, share what you're most proud of and all that. But then we took that information and we had town hall meetings. So somebody took all of those notes we had on our white papers, and we looked for common themes that came up. So we looked for across all the different groups, because there were probably 70 to 80 people in these different groups. We looked for the things that came up over and over again, and just listed them and tried to organize all of this text into recurring themes. And then we took that we called them town halls, but they could just be another committee meeting for you, and said, this is what we think we recorded. This is what we're pretty sure we heard. Does this match? Are we missing something? Is there something that shouldn't be here that's repetitive? So you get it down to a manageable chunk of information. And that can, and especially I think when people start envisioning or dreaming of what the future could look like. So for instance, yours, Christine, in the DEI area, when did you feel best about MCC as it relates to DEI experiences all the way through? In 10 years, what do you want us to look like in relation to this DEI business, or 5 years, whatever years? What's the ideal? Some groups drew pictures. I know Kevin Kaiser's group drew a very nice picture. because that's what he does. And so we took photographs of that picture. That's what makes it kind of fun and creative. And you still get the gist of what people are talking about.
I have a question. You know, when you started doing this with the academic master plan, I was really intrigued by it. So I appreciate you walking us through your process. But it sounds like because, you know, when we did this process before, and what SCUP usually has people do is at the very beginning of the process, everybody does the SWOT analysis. But in this case, we wouldn't want to ask the same questions because each committee has its own focus areas, correct?
Correct.
So
We also
then,
wouldn't want to talk about our threats or our weaknesses.
right. So in this example, then instead of in the first meeting or two, instead of everyone doing the SWOT analysis, we'd want everyone to do that first step where maybe they develop their interview questions and have those discussions, and then synopsize the results so that the hopes and wishes aren't necessarily equating to the goals that are set towards the end of the process. You'd start out at the beginning of the process, figuring out what your hopes and wishes are, and then build on those to identify what the specific goals would be. Is that?
Yes.
Okay.
So the hopes and wishes are more like, if you think of a vision, like what's your vision for, I know we have our overarching vision to win the Aspen Prize or whatever. That's not a or whatever. That would be a huge, awesome thing. But for the in the individual areas, hopes and wishes are kind of synonymous with the vision. So what's my vision for DEI or for the student experience? What would be my vision of the ideal student experience in 5 years? What would that look like? So then later we can strategize about, okay, what's it going to take to get there?
Okay, that's
So
helpful.
I think every committee, if you apply this process, you're going to have to think of the questions for when people sit down in small groups and talk to each other that relate to your area. So, when was the college at its best in regards to a student experience? Or when did you witness, or when did you have the best experience as a student here at the college for that student experience team?
I think one of the things that the co-chairs will want to keep in mind as they're developing those questions is the makeup of the committees. And right now we have 51 community stakeholders participating. So keep that in mind. Some like the community outreach committee has a lot more community members. Actually, technology and facilities has that it's all students and employees. So there's a little bit of a different mix. But as you look at your rosters, I set up the pivot table so you can clearly see by the group. So you know exactly how many students you have and how many community members you have. So I would just suggest that you keep that in mind. And then the other thing that might be of interest to you, just to think about if you're like breaking down into the smaller groups, like what Kelley suggested of 4 or 5 people, the committees right now are ranging from anywhere between 16 members and 37 members in community outreach. So just a few numbers for you to keep in mind as you're figuring out how to go forward with that first exercise.
Yeah, I'm looking up these committees. So it's it's hard to say. I think it will be interesting to see some of the committees where they have external stakeholders, because you'll have to design the questions so that they could relate to them. But I would think anybody who's going to be on our committee at least has a tie to us in some way, and they have their own personal experience with us that will be valuable, because we're all on the inside. We know how it works. We know at least how it's supposed to work. But having somebody from the outside say, okay, this was my very best experience with the college, it might be new to us. We might say, whoa, we didn't know that was so meaningful to you.
And maybe it won't even be a direct experience. Maybe it'll be they heard about their nephew went through some situation. Or maybe it'll be an employer who's like, well, this graduate came to us from MCC and they were really well equipped, you know, so they're going to have different perspectives. But I mean, they do have some sort of tie to us, which is how they got invited in the first place and why they're wanting to participate. So I think they all have some sort of passion related, whether it's going to be the student experience or from an employer perspective, or, you know, we had some people, there was at least one person who was working in mental health who really wanted to be an advocate to make sure that our students had access to all the mental health services that they want. So they all have these different reasons and passions for wanting to be involved. So even if they don't have a direct experience for us, they have a direct experience for what they want the community to experience, and at least a hope for the future for what they want for the community as it relates to what we can do.
Yeah.
I think too, it's also, you know, the approach, and you can focus on the problem, or you can focus on what are possible directions where we might go, or what are you doing in this area? Because I know from looking at, you know, evaluating people's Blackboard shells, or sitting in somebody's lecture, or, you know, going to conferences, it reminds me of that Harvard article that we have in CSS, how do you know what you don't know?
Oh, yeah.
And I think that there is so much that we don't know, because we do what we know, and we tend, you know, people tend to, or maybe we tend to, or problems come up, and so we're like, oh, well, we have to deal with this, and so we don't take the time to say, what would you do about this? And we were talking about, Christina and Patty and I were talking about this in our group about, you know, so much of it is about how do we communicate with students? And I said, you know, maybe, you know, some service people, we need to provide them with just a basic script, you know, and not everything that specifically that they should say. And I think Christine and I, years ago when I did customer service workshops, talked about, what was the word, Christina or Christine? Glad? Was it glad? Greet?
Listen.
To ascertain or advocate or
Anticipate, maybe anticipate.
yes. And then determine next steps.
Yep.
Yeah.
And I think that's part of it, is that do you, in addition to assisting whomever is in front of you with whatever they're dealing with, thinking about, you know, what else might they need to know? Because who among us doesn't appreciate it when we go to ask one thing and they say, oh, by the way, you might want to think about this too. And we're like, oh yeah, thanks.
Yeah.
So it's that above and beyond of information, you know, not bogging someone down with it, but just providing that, you know, those next steps that they might, you know, determining what next steps might be.
But it might be that, but remember, the whole part of appreciative inquiry is to listen for what you don't know. Yeah, I think the challenge is to be in the listening seat and to break people into groups or pair, like 3s or 4s, and really let them have time to talk it through and generate their thoughts and their ideas, and not, I mean, to me, the exciting part is getting excited for them to go through this, to see what comes out. There aren't going to be any right or wrong answers. It's just information to look at.
We just saw a lot of students on our group, so we were excited to hear what they have to say.
Oh yeah, I think that'd be really good. And if you even wanted to go to the trouble to pair people up and put them in their own little rooms on your Zoom meeting or whatever, so that you get, you know, maybe not 2 students together, but maybe 2 students together. I don't know. Think strategically what might generate the best thoughts for them. But there would just, if you use it with a group, there is a little bit of education that goes with it, to help them know exactly what you're wanting. And what you're wanting is get through these 2 or 3 questions, interview each other, write down your answers, and try not to judge, and just, and try to focus on the positive, help them stay in the positive, not start complaining about what's wrong. That's for a different day. But I mean, if there's, I guess, any one thing that I would say that's important to know about this, it's keeping it on the positive side.
Kelley, do you think that the committees, will it take more than one meeting to get to that first set of outcomes with their hopes and wishes? Or is that usually that you just have one conversation and then you talk about what we do well and what we value and what we hope for the future? And is that all in one conversation, or do you usually do that in segments?
We had all the questions were in one session that we had. So, and we had 5 questions, but it could be fewer than that. It could be, what was one of the best things or the best times you remember about MCC and related to DEI, let's say. And then what do you think is a core value of the college in relation to this? And then what opportunities do you see for the college? Or what 3 things, I really like the idea of 3 wishes, and that comes from career counseling and other kinds of personal counseling. That 3 wishes technique is a pretty common technique to get people to really say what's on their mind without saying, oh, that could never be, because it's a wish, right? So it helps them imagine things. So even if it was like, so I don't know how long the meetings are going to be. If it's on Zoom, probably shouldn't be too terribly long unless you mix up the activity. But I think you could get through the process where you've got quite a bit of material to work with, as long as you get at something that gets at, okay, what am I most happy with or most excited about it in relation to this college and this topic of my committee? What do I most value about the college in relation to this topic or this committee? What opportunities do I see for the college in this area? And then what are the 3 things I just wish for in the next 5 or 10 years in relation to the college and this topic? Does that make sense?
I thought so. Do you think do you get better results if the co-chairs share, like identify those interview questions ahead of time? So when people come to that meeting, they can process what their answers might be, or do you get better results if it's just off the cuff?
I don't think I'd share it ahead of time.
Okay.
I mean, because I think people, not because they couldn't prep a little and think about it, that might be good, but I think people just get inundated with information and emails.
That's
and
true.
I think
That's
to keep
true.
it isolated, you're not expected to do any pre-work. You're not, at least right now, expected to do any after work. We just want you to be totally present for this experience.
Nice. And then the outcomes, just so I know from my coordination viewpoint, the outcomes that or the outputs from each of the committees will be what we do well, what we value, and what we hope for the future, or the 3 wishes, if it's put in that category. So that's what the co-chairs would be delivering back to the steering committee.
That's just what, yeah, that worked well for our academic master planning.
Okay.
I think that's a good foundation to have. Yeah.
Not that it's going to change their direction, but I think it'd be interesting to see that in summary for everybody, for all the committee members, to see what each committee came up with for the what they identified, what we do.
So what I would say is that I don't think the committees should make those identifications. I think the co-chairs should take all the information generated from these people having these discussions in 3s or 4s. So every group of 3 or 4 should be asked to record their answers to these. Then you bring them back into a bigger group and people report out very briefly, just because people want to say, here's what I'm excited about. So they report out really briefly each group. And then the co-chairs need to take all of that data and look for the common themes. I think it would bog the group down to say, okay, now we got to identify our common values and our common whatever. It's more like looking across all of that, those words and that information, and find the themes and make a tentative. It can even be, here's tentatively what we think this group identified as the values. Now as a committee, let's come together and confirm, is that true? Did we miss something? Is there anything we should add? Does that make sense? I can be an unofficial consultant if you want.
I'm sure all the co-chairs would appreciate that.
I haven't done this that much, but I have done a lot of counseling in my life, and I know how that feels like to come from a more affirmative point of view than let's
I
focus
wouldn't turn
on.
down any free help.
Pardon?
I wouldn't turn down free help.
For you, I might bill. I don't know. I am a doctor now,
Congratulations.
Yeah, thanks. It was a long time coming. So when I just talked to John about this kickoff thing, and we're talking about how he can tie his part into this whole appreciative inquiry approach. And I think it works perfectly, because if our whole theme is what are we aspiring to and to become, he's going to set the vision for all of us for the next 5 years. And then we're all going to build on that in a positive energy way to get to aspire. We're all aspiring to something positive. We're not trying to fix something that's broken. So George put a link up. Nice, George, thanks. There's actually a book I have that's this book. It's Appreciative Inquiry in Higher Education. So it gives some examples. It gives some case studies they've done. So if anybody gets stuck or you just don't know what to do, just call me. We can talk it out, because I don't know either. We'll just talk it out.
Kelly, they reference a book on that website. I don't know if it's the same book. It says 6 questions that lift your leadership, shape your strategy, and transform your organization. Trying to see who the authors are here. It's hard to read.
Oh, it's the ebook. Is that?
Yeah.
one?
There's an ebook.
Yeah, this one's not an ebook. Oh, free. Yeah. No, it's not. What? No, not the same authors either.
No, this seems like a pretty powerful approach if it's handled well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think where when we had it in person, the people who facilitated the groups, like you're the co-chair, so you would technically be facilitating these groups. When you're there in person, you can sort of overhear the people interviewing or talking to each other and kind of head off if it starts going in a negative direction. I don't know how we do that on a Zoom, except just to help people, remind them, and maybe if you know some people who are on your committee, plant that seed ahead of time, just to say, remember to keep it positive. Maybe if you sort people into the groups of 3 or 4, that you purposefully plant some people that are pretty optimistic people, like a Linda Hood, or I don't know what people have signed on to what, but a Jenny Klingenberg or a JB Muhlenberg, they're just generally positive people. If you can plant them strategically, sometimes that will help too.
If you're using the breakout function in Zoom, you can, as the hosts, hop between all the rooms constantly.
Mm-hmm.
But I mean, they'll see it coming and going.
Yeah, and that might be helpful. Especially if you get, some students who aren't just certain how it works, or community members who are uncertain of the process. You probably might want to provide a handout or something as they come in, a paper of, okay, these are the questions to ask each other. You're just interviewing each other. They don't even need to know it's called appreciative inquiry. All they need to know is we're taking a positive, high energy approach to this planning. And we want to focus on what we're good at and what we could become. And Georgia, I mean, George's, what he shared has this 4D model. And I think Tina shared that too, the discovery, the dream, the design, the deploy. What I've talked about today is pretty much the discovery and the dream phases. I think, and maybe the design too, but the deploy, that really is getting into what are we going to do over the next 5 years? That's not probably going to be the place, at least in the initial meetings.
The deploy might be the implementation plan, which doesn't get developed until November.
Right. This
So
helps us
that-
see what we're gonna implement to get
Right.
to where we want to go.
Well, I think this approach sounds great. Thank you so much for sharing that.
Sure.
Are all of the co-chairs comfortable with this approach? Anybody have any other questions? I'll try and encapsulate what Kelley talked about and send and I'll put it on the portal for you because I know you don't need another email, but I'll put it in there under the there's a tab called co-chair resources, so I'll add it there, and then anybody can access that, and Kelley or anybody else can add their notes or suggestions to it. It can just be a live document that people can add notes to as you kind of share and explore how you're going through it. Does that sound like a plan? Is there anything else I can do to support that?
I think it might be fun after a few, after you all try this, that we get together and debrief a little bit, like what, how'd it go? Was it fun? It's supposed to be fun for everybody, including you.
I like that idea.
Mm-hmm. You good? Irene's good.
All right, so if there aren't any other questions for Kelley about AI, since I have you on, is there anybody that has any questions about the process overall or your role as co-chair or any other support that you need or suggestions you have?
I'm feeling good about it.
All right, good. Well, just let me know. The Zoom phones are working great. I love being able to answer my office phone right on the computer. So if anybody needs help with anything, just call or text me or get a hold of me, whatever way is easiest for you, and I'll do whatever I can to help with anything. Otherwise, we're preparing for the launch on Monday. There's one co-chair represented from each committee who will be speaking on behalf of the committee, because there's not really going to be enough time for all three co-chairs to talk, but we hope that everyone will be there, whether they're speaking that day or not. It will be set up as a Zoom meeting, so we'll all be there and be able to see each other. We're not sharing the link publicly, so we don't have to worry. I hope we don't have to worry about any gate crashers that day, but I think it'll be a good meeting. And so far, we're getting good responses from the students and community members who volunteered. So I think it'll be a good turnout and a good start to the process. So.
Okay.
All right. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Thanks,
Kelley,
Tina.
very much.
Thanks,
Mhm.
Tina. Thanks,
Have a
Kelley.
good day. Thank you for all the work on this too.